Man, mm, I got that survey, the Macarena survey, and I filled it out. I was diligent. I saw some people talking on chat, going, "Hey, I didn't get it," and they were arguing about whether they sent it out to all odd numbered members or all even numbered. I don't know. But it was thought provoking. I was like, what triggered them to do that? Um, Maybe they're seeing some fall off. Mm. Tell us what to do. What do you want? Mm. I want The Walking Dead. Yeah, I guess that's a key thing. It's like, having friends that you play with that really last for a long time. I don't like DD Hellraiser. You know, I want him to come back. And Israel, Raquette 56, ISA. Sadia, what is wrong with you? And of course, Traintastic. Or is that just automatic? I didn't do anything. I didn't change nothing. Let me just pilot. Nothing. I don't know if I should look in here. See, I didn't win any of that coin. Gotta have 2 more fortune keys before I can spin the big wheel. Um,
Voulez-vous apprendre le français rapidement? Do you want to learn French quickly? If so, then
One more.
We think, yeah, just one more final question. Let's
I
go.
hope this one can be a woman. My God, I feel.
Yeah, wait, any woman wants a question? Yes, there's a woman at the back. I think. I can't see anything.
I just revealed, yeah, when I'm on my own, I'm listening to Slavoj Žižek on double speed.
I am really and you may be surprised by this, but I even like the weather. Hell is for me some stupid Mediterranean beach with all the sun and so on. No, this is the weather that I like. Okay, so I am a little bit afraid that in which direction to take, because most of you are not philosophers. So I will try in this maximum quarter of an hour introduction. Maybe I will do it like this, to begin with, more, not purely philosophical stuff, but some stuff with philosophical consequences, and then conclude with some political remarks. It will be a little bit, I will be associating and so on, I don't want to bore you. I would like to begin with 2 Jewish which have a deep, properly metaphysical meaning. One I've already used in my old books. Hopefully you all don't know it. The other one is fresh, only now I learned about it. The first one is that classical one, you know, on Sabbath, on Saturday, Jewish believers meet in a synagogue and each of them says something. So first, a big rabbi said, "Oh my God, I am nobody. I am not worthy of your attention, God." Then a rich Jewish merchant comes and says, "Oh my God, I'm also nobody. Don't even consider me. I'm not worthy of your attention." Then, I hope you know the joke, a poor Jew stands up and says, "God, I'm also a nobody." And then the rich merchant kicks the rabbi and said, "Who is this guy that he thinks he can also say that he is a nobody?" There is deep truth in this. Whenever somebody apparently humiliates himself and so on, adopts this attitude of, "I despise my nation, my identity, blah, blah," be very careful for looking for secret privilege, what as a Lacanian I would have called surplus enjoyment. I will give you an example which may be even provocative to some of you. I've written about it extensively. In United States, in these politically correct times, there is one basic rule, very simple. Further that you are from white, male, Protestant, whatever elite, more you are allowed to assert your particular ethnic, religious identity. Like Native Americans, so-called, they hate this term. Indians, I prefer to call them. Do you know my joke, which really happened in Missoula, Montana? One Indian referred to himself as Indian, and immediately a white, well-meaning liberal interrupted him. "No, you're Native American. Don't you know that you are humiliating yourself?" And the Indian gave a perfect answer. He says, "No, sorry."
Recently, and for no reason at all, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation.
Native American is for me much more racist. It means I am Native American, part of nature, and what are you, cultural American or what? He said, "I prefer to be called Indian. In this way, at least my name is a sign of white man's stupidity." You know, they thought they are in India. He got it correctly. No, sorry, let's go on seriously. Native Americans, okay. Black, okay. Then Chinese suspicion begins. Italians, maybe Germans, Scandinavians, but if white, WASP, Anglo-Saxon or whatever, if you just say, "I also want to assert my identity," you are a fascist. You are decried as a fascist and so on. Now, I know well-founded reasoning behind this, because this is effectively the hegemonic position. It's not the same for you or for a poor Native American to say, "I want to assert my identity." But I noticed something else. How beneath, I'm now talking about these typical multiculturalist, leftist liberals, beneath this self-humiliating gesture, we are guilty for everything. Imperialist colonizers, we don't have the right. Renouncing all your particular features always comes with, in a discreet way, asserting your position of universality. All this apparently modest, self-denigrating white people, at the same time, I noticed, have no problems behaving in a very patronizing way towards others, correcting them, telling them when they are making a mistake or whatever. So clearly, the secret profit is this moral authority given to you in this way. I think there is something of the same with how in Europe, and I have all sympathy for them, but nonetheless, how in Europe leftists, left liberals, behave towards immigrants. Of course, we should be, my God, my position is do not be afraid, very leftist here. I just noticed how, in their very understanding of immigrants, how they always already patronize them. Like, if immigrants do, and like all people, they are a mixed crowd. There are criminals among them and so on. If they do something horrible, rape and so on, white liberals are always looking for an excuse. Oh, this is just general human nature. We are all like that. Or they were so victimized by us, we should understand this and so on and so on. And one of my immigrant friends exploded and told me that it's a beautiful paradox philosophically. He told me, my God, my basic human right is at least to be recognized as an adult, responsible person, which practically means to be able to do something horrible. Are they aware that by treating me almost like a child in this way, they are humiliating me and so on and so on? So I think that, again, okay, I will not go into political consequences here, just beware how also with political correctness, often the position of a victim can be used as a nice instrument to justify your exerting of, in academia, American is typical. In outside, victims are really victims. But in academia, playing with victimhood, if you're a privileged victim, gives you an incredible power, de facto. That would be my first point. Let's go to the second point. So, I mentioned the notion, this surplus enjoyment, profit that you get from apparently denigrating, humiliating yourself. And this is my Hegelian, Lacanian standpoint that every position of subject, even the most empty Cartesian subject, has to rely on this type of small feature, surplus enjoyment, which sustains its subjectivity. I will give you another example here, short philosophical idea. Although I was accused of I don't know what, I really, for theoretical reasons, read the last chapter in my last book where I explain it, but I really believe in subversive potential, not in this cheap sense they cause disorder, but some deep insights on which LGBTQ, this transgenderism, is based. But since we are here also among some of you these philosophers, I would like to draw one attention to it. You know that the official term is now LGBT+, or LGBTQ whatever plus. Now, usually, sorry to be critical against at least part of your tradition, but usually this plus is understood in empiricist way, or British empiricism. The idea is this one. It's not just the binary sexuality, male or female, blah, blah. There are dozens, multiplicity of gender or sex positions. And since no classification can be really exhausting, what if another guy comes and says, I read your classification, but I'm neither bigender, nor butch, nor this, nor asexual, I'm something else? So it's this simple worry, what if we nonetheless miss some position? So let's leave the space open. I think, and it's not me, it's, I forgot her name, but it's a very good LGBT plus theoretician, a lady from Australia, who did a proper Hegelian move and said, no, what if we, when you have LGBTQ plus, what if we define this plus itself as a specific position? I can be a plus. And this is, I think, even the best definition of a subject. A subject is not simply something. A subject is always in excess of what he, she, it is. And this is why I go very fast here. If you want to know more, read my books or whatever. This is why not only psychoanalysis is not male chauvinist, but it's immanently feminist, in the sense that subject as such is ultimately feminine. Why? Because this defines for me ultimately femininity, this self-questioning attitude, which can be discerned even in some most superficial, annoying features. You know, like you are in love with a woman and she will sooner or later ask you, tell me, why do you love me? But it's a very deep question. You know why? Because of course it has no answer. I mean, the moment you know it, the moment you can say, because of your eyes, because of your legs, because of your laughter, it's not love. Love must be that plus X. In other words, historical questioning is the most elementary form for me of critique of ideology. Ideology is in very vague sense. Ideology is an order. Ideology is, at its most elementary, what society tells you that you are. You are a man, a Muslim, a Christian, atheist, Democrat, worker, whatever. But the most elementary questioning is this: why am I what you are saying that I am? This not accepting any objective position as yours. And here again, the function of the plus is crucial. That's why intelligent psychoanalysis always prefers hysteria to perversion. Perversion is, I claim, even in clinical terms, always conformist. Perversion is simply the hidden aspect of a power structure. But okay, let's not lose time. My second joke and then some political remarks. Which goes more into, because I am an atheist, but a Christian atheist. I will not go into this, what this means. What does this mean for theology? A Jewish friend told me, and at least for me this joke is new, I didn't hear it before, a wonderful story. I warn you, no trigger warning. Nothing terrible happens, but it's a very cruel joke, and I discovered with wonder and respect how, you know that there is a contradiction of Jewish jokes about Auschwitz. Not cheaply making fun, but drawing out the paradox. And there is something, we don't have time to go into it now, very deep in it. I claim that when, for tragedy to take place, it must happen what is going on within certain limits, where the victim retains its dignity. You know, tragedy. When things get really terrifying, a mode of comedy has to end. This is not a comedy where you just laugh, but a horrifying comedy. Okay, so the joke is this one. In paradise, some Jews who were slaughtered at Auschwitz, nice life there, at the bench, and talk about their memories of how they were killed, making fun. Like one said to another, do you remember, Jacob, how when they dragged you to death chamber, you slipped on something and hit your head and died even before you entered gas chamber, and oh yeah, that was so funny, and so on. Now comes the deep insight. Then God, also taking a break, God himself walks by them, listens at these jokes, and says, sorry guys, I don't understand it. Now, for you to understand the point of this joke, you must know that this whole theological tradition of claiming God died at Auschwitz, things that happened there are so horrible that they cannot be in any way combined with the idea of divinity as the hidden master of the universe. Like, God, as they put it, that's crucial. As many theologians put it, God was not there. Okay, so God comes there and says, sorry guys, I don't understand it. Then one of the Jews goes to God, embraces him in a patronizing way and says, don't worry, our Lord. You were not there, so of course you cannot understand this, you know. But you know what's the beauty? It's not, in this version, it's not that God cannot understand the horror. He can. is all-powerful. He cannot understand how it's possible to make a joke out of it. God doesn't get the joke. In this sense, I will not go into it now, I think that what I call materialist theology retains God, not as real God, old guy up there, but as some kind of a presupposed agency which registers things, you know, and we all rely on it. As Jacques Lacan put it, the moment we talk, we believe in God. Why? Because we believe that when something is spoken out, registered, it exists in a different way. To give an extremely simple example, didn't it happen to you, unfortunately, with my bad manners, it often happens to me, you are with a couple of friends, and some of you, in that case it was me, did something horrible and shameful. You know that everybody else knows it. And everybody knows that all other knows it. But nonetheless, everything changes the moment one says this publicly. That's the moment of registration. But what I want to say is that I like this theological idea that God is like a benevolent master who allows you small niches where you can violate even his prohibitions, you know. God, like a proper, severe, old-fashioned father. Today, in our post-patriarchal era, I almost like them. Because no matter how severe they pretend to be, that's how traditional authority functions. The idea is always, do it, violate my prohibitions, but discreetly. I don't want to know about it. And according to some good theologists, this is even what you have in 10 Commandments. You know, the commandment, don't celebrate other gods. This is not the correct rendition. It's in the Bible, Old Testament, a much more ambiguous statement, which basically means don't praise other gods in my presence. Like, you know, do it, but discreetly and so on. And, okay, I will not get lost here. I'm talking too much. So we can go on in the debate, if you want, about modes of authority today. I would just like conclude with a very simple joke I've used in some of my texts, but they were not published in big media. You probably don't know it. Where are we today? I am still some kind of critique of ideology. And what is happening, I claim, is that ideology is now alive, but in new modes. There are two, I think, main modes. One, which two? You probably know the old formula of Marx, religion is the opium of the people. I think now we have to change this formula. That we have, now I hope you will get the joke, I often use it in talks, but not here. We have today two new opiums of the people. You can guess which ones, literally. Opium and the people. One is opium, literally. If you read statistics, at least in degenerate spaces like academia and so on, you know that literally in United States around 80% of professors' students are already into Prozac and all that stuff. Like, we literally need a support in chemistry and so on just to function relatively normally. And at all levels, from this simple antidepressives to drugs proper, whatever. What's so interesting is the circular nature of this support. First, if you are too excited, you take a calmant to calm you down. But then you lose desire, you take another drug to resuscitate. So this is a very important thing. How, for our daily psychic life to function, we have more and more to rely on different drugs, in this metaphoric sense, opium. Second, people. I think that precisely the big opium today is people, populism. And for reasons that we can debate later, I don't want to go into it now. That's why I have doubts about what is getting popular now among some European leftists, leftist populists. in the sense of, oh, if the right can do it successfully, rightist populism is a kind of, I call it ironically, perverted Me Too. Why not Me Too? Why we no, I think that populism is always this gesture of simplification. You create an image of the enemy, and it may work in short term, but not really. For example, in the United States today, of course, Trump is the enemy. But my God, if you want to be an intelligent political analyst and agent, you should also ask the obvious question: where did Trump come from? What were we, I think that means liberal democratic hegemony, what were we doing wrong to open up the space for Trump? I will not lose your time here, just I will finish with one conclusive sad thought, two sad points to conclude. First, I already mentioned it talking with some of you before. People say communism has failed. It has, but at the same time, that's bad. Look what is happening in China. I mean, it is still a communist power. In this combination, communism with capitalism, are you aware what the Chinese communists did? Something absolutely unique, never in the history of mankind, I think. Did you have such a tremendous economic development in just a couple of decades? And do you know what they did? To simplify it very much, leftists hate two things. On the one hand, this wide capitalist competition market. On the other hand, strong authoritarian state which controls regulates everything. The Chinese have combined the two, the work in an extremely successful way. So what to do here is a very difficult question. What if our future will be, and this is not good, I don't see that I see. What if this type of authoritarian capitalism is our future? Second reason of my pessimism. Marxism, at least the traditional one, relied on a certain, how should I call it, pre-established character. That we, when we are just before the revolution or in modern times, are facing in a unique situation where the highest theoretical insight, communism, breaking out of capitalism, blah, blah, can somehow be rooted in the concrete living experience of the majority of the people. We are proletarians, we need radical change, and so on and so on. I think that with problems that we are facing today, ecology, biogenetics, and so on, I'm more of a pessimist. I doubt if problems which we are really confronting today can be in this way applied or connected to mobilizing the people. For example, and I will be very brutal last sentence, I promise. For example, here I disagree with my otherwise good friend, I support him politically, Yanis Varoufakis, who says we need more democracy in Europe. And I'm always asking me, and I think it is a good answer. Okay, but are you aware that, for example, with immigrants, refugees entering Europe, if you were to do a truly democratic election, the result would have been much more xenophobic than the predominant reaction. In practically all European countries, they would have said, stop, stop. That's what I also learned from my diplomatic friends when they were dealing with this problem when the crisis was at its high point 2 years ago, or when, for example, politicians from my country, I learned, it's terrible irony, they were relatively fair, saying we are nonetheless co-responsible, we are among the causes of this crisis in the Middle East and so on, in closed sessions. Publicly, they were much more anti-immigrant because they knew they would lose votes in their own country and so on and so on. So I think we live in a very dangerous situation where maybe the gap between what needs to be done and simple opinion of the many, inclusive many intellectuals. I'm not saying ordinary people are stupid. Intellectuals are not. They are also. I'm just, no. What I mean is, I'm just a pessimist here. Miracles happen, but we no longer can have this Marxist trust in history. You know, so to conclude with another one line, don't be afraid. Joke that I quote in my book, you know, when my leftist friends remain optimists and say, don't worry, the situation may be dark, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. You know what I am? Of course it is. It's another train approaching us from there. Thanks very much for your kind follow. My God, I feel as if I am in a movie set where, you know, they are now changing the scene. I hope you did it in a proper cinematic Stalinist way. When we will have a Q&A with the people, I hope you did distribute the questions and yeah, okay. Please, I'm sorry, I talk too much now. I'm your slave.
My first question is, in the opening chapter of the new book, you talk about philosophers becoming state philosophers and negating the radical potential of their philosophies to the subservience of the existing order. How do you think philosophers can still be a part of radical movements? What distinguishes people like yourself who are energizing radical politics from those, like you say, like Habermas, who are just supporting the state structure?
Wait a minute, maybe I was there not fair enough. Now, I will be very honest. I am not dismissing state philosophy. Wait a minute, our institutions, the way we do politically and so on, do imply certain, not philosophical, technical sense, but a certain basic view. Here I would even agree with Habermas' great opponent, Peter Sloterdijk, a right-winger, but my good friend, intelligent right-winger, who says that, although he is a right-winger, he means this positively, that the greatest thing of our Western European, insofar as they feel like it's less and less, welfare state, is that we don't just get what he calls subjective social democracy. Socialism. We get something that is very nicely called objective social democracy. That is to say, social democratic values, human rights, social justice, and so on, inscribed into political institutions themselves, or even more, silently accepted as shared by all. You know which was the greatest example of this? I remember, you are too young, I think it was mid-70s or later, when Social Democrats for the first time lost power in Sweden. But then that coalition of what we, when I was young, called bourgeois parties, liberals, conservatives, nothing changed. They nationalized even more fast. It went on because this basic social pact, not so much written rules, but unwritten rules, was there. And it's here, I have a certain respect. It's almost a heroic role for Habermas to say, I know I will be despised as a conformist, but okay, I will play the idiot who is this. But for me, if you remember, then I go on and I say that today the situation is getting more complex, and I really think that so-called alt-right, especially in the United States and in some other countries, change the rules. Because is it popular here in the UK, the book by that Irish girl who now lives in New York? I met her there in Brooklyn even. Angela Nagle or what?
Manvik
She wrote
Padya.
a book, you should have it, Kill All the
sure?
Normies. His idea is that what half a century ago was a typical left subversive attitude, you know, the institutional power is severe, strict, speaks in decent terms. We should provoke, tell dirty jokes, use F-word, all this subversive marginal culture tradition. But he said what happens now is not symmetrical inversion, but almost an inversion. Alt-right now behaves as formally as the new counterculture, and the horror is that the left, whatever remains of it, took refuge in political correctness, in helpless moralism and so on and so on. I don't think so. This complicates things, and that's why I am a Leninist. It's a joke, but not quite. You know in what sense? You know, it's very interesting to read last Lenin's writing when he was totally desperate. He saw no socialism, what can we do? And you know with what Lenin was obsessed in the last 2 years of his life? With good manners, civility, and so on. You know, you all, if you know history of politics and so on, know that famous short testament that Lenin stated proposing to Politburo to impose Stalin. But did you notice what are Lenin's arguments about Stalin? It's not wrong economic policy, wrong politics. It is simply Stalin doesn't have good manners, he's too rough and so on. Now today with Trump and so on, and many other Trumps like that Bolsonaro guy in Brazil and so on, wouldn't it be, that's my secret dream. Now you will say this is a joke because I am obscene. No, but I try to be obscene in a non-offensive way. That it would be wonderful for me, for the left, to say, no, we are the true force of moral majority. We are the true force of decency. You are the dirty subversive, the right wing. I love this strategy of changing the cars. I will give you another example. In Germany, one of my friends wrote a wonderful comment where she says, we should change this perception, although I don't idealize her that Angela Merkel is too weak, allowed too many immigrants, like an old mother losing power, and then anti-immigrant nationalists present themselves as, you know, courageous, we fight for our nation. The point of my friend was, shouldn't we rather say, Angela Merkel is the last, in the good sense of the term, great German patriot and strong nationalist. Why? Because to say to million refugees you can come, it means you have a great trust in your nation, that it will be able to integrate them and so on and so on. And the point is, we should rather treat alt-right anti-immigrants as weak people who don't trust their nation and so on and so on. You know, I think it's very good to mix cards like this in political struggle. So I didn't properly answer your question, but you see in what direction I'm going. No,
I want to ask about the Christian materialism and the importance of the church that you've written about. Do you think that the theological, the philosophical, the normative tools of Christianity that you find helpful are going to survive if the church continues to decline? Or do you think that the institution of the church and adherence to the church has no bearing on those surviving materialistic aspects?
It's an open question, especially Catholic Church. I don't believe in it. It can be Franciscus or not. I have doubts, but you know, it's okay. I will very briefly give it to you. The way I read Christianity, if you take it really seriously, it's really a religion of atheism. In what sense? And Hegel knew this. He says, the big problem is what died on the cross. Hegel says, it's not just, you read Christianity in a pagan way. If you think God is up there, he sent us a messenger, and then messenger died and cried, and God says, God the Father, okay, my son, come back to me, it didn't work, next time, better luck, and so on. No, Hegel says, what dies on the cross is the very God of beyond. This idea that there is a higher power up there. You know what's so paradoxical of Christianity for me? Again, in all, more or less, religions, the way we are here, we live a fallen life, and the only way to get back to God contact is to do good works, purify yourself, whatever, through mystical exercise, to good deeds, and so on, to climb up again. I came in Christianity, don't people notice this? Something totally different happens. And Chesterton, my good Catholic theologist, knew it. He says that that moment, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, God, why have you forsaken me? It means this. How do you identify with God? Let's say I feel abandoned, God has left me, I'm in a godless world. The Christian answer again is not, okay, let me pray hard, do good things, maybe I will re-establish contact. It's to say, but at that very point, when I feel abandoned by God, I'm identified with Christ on the cross who felt the same. That is to say, as Hegel puts it very precisely, I overcome the division from God by transposing it into God himself. This idea that my distance from God is inscribed into God himself. The consequences of this are then pretty radical. For example, I think it's totally wrong reading the usual one that what will be second coming? Somehow Christ will come again. No, Christ is dead. He is already here in Holy Spirit. What is Holy Spirit or Ghost? I don't know how you read it. It is, I simplify it very much. It is the community of believers, and as Christ says, my God, in the Gospel, when he's asked by one of his pupils, how will we know that you are still alive, that you will come? He says, whenever there is love between two of you, I am there. And I take this totally literally. Second coming means that you discover that what you are waiting for, oh my God, God left us, maybe he will come again, is already here in the community of believers. You don't need God as an old guy up there, a secret guarantee, and so on and so on. Intelligent theologists knew this. Like even a conservative, like Claudel, Paul Claudel, the great poet, said the ultimate mystery of Christianity is not that we are impotent without God, but that God is impotent without us. Okay, that's more complex, but in this sense, I mean it quite literally about being an atheist Christian. I specifically don't mean all those simplistic ideas that Christianity can be realized in new communist society or whatever, all those things. No, I think that, again, the secret core of Christianity is precisely this acceptance of being on your own as precisely divine gift. You know, what is the Christian answer when you feel alone, abandoned by God, just depending on yourself? The message is that this is God's gift, freedom that God gave us. It's much more complex situation. I don't want to lose time now. I just want to tell you that don't you just think that this is some crazy obsession. Many
Let's take some questions.
we are in democratic phase.
Exactly, democratic phase. Only very occasionally, Vela.
My last joke before I give you the word. You know, I'm an old Platonist. I'm repeating the joke I already used there. So I'm all for a dialogue. But, you know, as a lover of Plato, you know, this is my favorite dialogue. If you read Plato's dialogue, you know how they are written. One guy talks all the time, and the other guy says every 10 minutes by Jews, so it is Socrates and so on. So let's have this dialogue now.
So please wait for the microphone to come to you, but let's go to the hand on the end of the aisle there in the dark blue coat. Yeah.
That's why I asked you to do this. This is a moment of anxiety.
This is one few things I can.
Yes, yes. Yeah, but how did you know this political circumstance and somebody will say what you're doing wrong and good? Okay, sorry, please.
Professor Zizek, a fan of yours from South Africa here. I wanted to ask you, Ian Hobson, And
Sorry, ask me.
ask you, yes. We're in Oxford now, and the analytical school of philosophy is big here. And it seems as though that the burden always falls onto continental philosophers to justify their existence. And I wanted you to talk to this point, as to the value, the value of continental philosophy in the 21st century. Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Again, my position is here much more integrated complex. First, I must tell you, I said there is much boring stuff going on in so-called analytic philosophy. But there are many things which I fully admire going on there. And also, for example, I don't know, he now disappeared, I don't know why. Philosophers like Sol Kripke, some others, and so on, they did, or even cognitivists. There are very intelligent cognitivists who raise the right questions and so on, but nonetheless, and also there is a lot of bullshit, not taking scientific breakthroughs seriously, going in so-called continental philosophy. The big problem for me today is what I call the gap between realism and transcendental approach. On the one hand, we have scientific or realist philosophical approach, don't be afraid, I will describe this, which simply pretends to describe reality the way it is, to put it in very simplistic terms. You forget about who you are from where you are speaking. Then we have transcendental reasoning, which is not something mystical and so on, but it's based on the simple fact that our argumentation is ultimately always circular. For example, their reproach, for example, to mention the guy that you brought, Habermas, his basic contribution is to claim that from the scientific perspective, one thing you cannot explain is the normative discursive structure of this scientific procedure itself. If you can be very good at scientific explanation, evolutionary and so on, of this stuff, what goes on, how the human intelligence arrives. But in all this is possible because you approach nature in a certain way, as a complex cobweb of causes, effects, and so on and so on. This doesn't go by itself. So the idea is that we all approach reality from a certain perspective, and we cannot ever break out of this circle. And now, so that ultimately, but on the other hand, it's clear that somehow, although we are always caught in our symbolic universe and so on, and some of you follow modern thought, the ultimate, in my sense of the term now, not in the substantia, transcendental philosopher would be, for example, somebody like Michel Foucault. For him, the ultimate horizon of our knowledge is what he calls episteme. The idea is that in every epoch, a certain, it may be conflictual, but opposite sides always share some presuppositions. A certain base, for example, the opposition between empiricism and rationalism. But they share a whole set of presuppositions about reality and so on. So the idea is this one, that this is the ultimate thing. So, for example, if you were to ask Michel Foucault, do we have an immortal soul or not? The answer would have been, all I can do is to describe the episteme, the set of implicit presuppositions within which this question has meaning at all. And if you ask him, do you believe in evolutionary account of humanity? His answer would have been, I can only tell you that this evolutionary account is part of a modern scientific paradigm and as such totally different from, for example, medieval paradigm, within which meaning was something immanent to reality itself. the universe is meaningful. So what I'm saying is that, on the other hand, of course, we all admit, at least almost all of us, that although this is another point, if there are some Marxists here. Marxists, at least so-called Western Marxists, are also fully transcendental. In what sense? For radical Marxists, the ultimate horizon is social practice. And as Lukács, in the ultimate Western Marxist work, his first big book, History and Class Consciousness, he even says, this is a classic statement, nature is a historical social category. Which means, of course, somehow we did, humanity, we did emerge out of nature. But what we understand by nature is something which is always historically overdetermined and as part of our social practice. Nature means something totally different in modernity than in early Renaissance and so on and so on. So we have this ultimate tension. On the one hand, naive scientific realism, on the other hand, this transcendental approach. And what I'm obsessed with in my last works, I'm always writing the same book and so on, is precisely, is it possible to break out of this circle? Is it possible to move beyond this transcendental approach that we can just describe the historical horizon of meaning into which we were thrown without returning to naive realism? Here, we should be creative. For example, who was that guy? I forgot his name. Often here, and that's for me the strength of continental approach, some criticism, even theological, of science, which can appear stupid, and it is stupid at the level of direct scientific value, can be extremely interesting if we read it in a slightly different way as theory of ideology. For example, do you know that, I forgot the guy's name, Darwin had a friend who knew his work, Darwin's, and was at the same time theologist. Yes, the one who did, his reply to Darwin was, I forgot the name, it's a Latin name, I'm too stupid, for navel. You know, it's the old problem, Adam is depicted with a navel. But wait a minute, Adam was not born, he was created. Why then does he have it? So the idea is this one, and it's such an ingenious solution. He said, Darwin conclusively proves through fossils and so on that our Earth, or our universe was created at least 1 million years ago. If you take Bible literally, it was 4,000 and some years. So where is the truth? You know what is the answer? Of course, Bible is true, my God. It cannot be not true. So how do we explain fossils and so on? The idea is that the same way when you paint a stage, you paint the background to create a false impression of depth. That God directly created fossils and so on to give us a false opening of the past. And this is the best definition of ideology I can imagine and so on. Aren't we all the time inventing traditions in this sense and so on and so on? So again, to answer you properly, it's maybe too complex now. But I try to, first I have tremendous, you know what's one of my interests here, maybe this was some interest to you. The latest result, insofar as I understand them, I'm the first to admit my limitation. Now, what is happening now in quantum physics, I was told, and I read some popular books, but I tried to check it with my friends who are quantum physicists, like, and I totally laughing or that with this quantum gravity theory and so on, there is a tremendous progress beyond string theory going on now. And I think that some of the things that you find in quantum physics are, I think, of incredible significance to resolve this problem, because the basic presupposition of quantum physics, it's precisely that what we perceive as natural reality is not the ultimate reality. That there is, whatever we call it, quantum oscillations and so on, another level. And I think that this is how, let's call it, ontology at the level of today's world defines. If I may go on for 2-3 minutes, you will like it. I promise. I'm sorry. I hope you don't know this joke, but I love it. A philosopher, I'm very sorry, I forgot his name. You know my humility that I forget many names. Used a wonderful example to explain quantum physics. And my point is the basic paradox of quantum physics. My point is to apply it to reality as such. His idea is this one. Wonderful simple metaphor. A parallel between quantum universe, which is, as you know, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, although Bohr puts it in a slightly different way. But the point is this one. You know, what everybody knows. You cannot measure simultaneously the position and the velocity movement of a particle. Okay, now you can read this in epistemological way. We just cannot measure. Niels Bohr went a step further and claimed it is in itself that it's not determined. It is a wonderful vision of reality which is in itself ontologically incomplete. And now comes the parallel with video games. Aren't they in the same similar, very analogy? Incomplete. In what sense? You remember, I don't play them, but I watch my son doing it and I envy him and so on. When you play a video game, let's say you see a house there. But if it's not part of the game to enter that house, then the interior of the house is not programmed. You know this, you know. In the video universe, it's orange. In the background, there is a forest. But it's meaningless to say, let's go there and look in detail at the trees. No, because it's not part of the game that you can go there. So, in this book, the idea is this one. It's a very cynical one, but I love it. God did something similar. He underestimated us humans. He thought that we will never be intelligent enough to move beyond atoms to microparticles. So he said, fuck, why should I waste time programming there everything? So we, as it were, caught God with his pens down, you know. But my point is, we can, how would it be to think reality as unfinished without this subjectivity, God, whatever? Is it possible to think reality as unfinished? And here, I think, utopian as it may appear, only a kind of a collaboration between the best of continental tradition, not those arrogant Europeans who despise analytic philosophy, just, and the best of analytical philosophers can do the job. Sorry, I'm too long. What can I say?
Great, let's take another question. Yeah, let's go to the hand over here.
Ah, you're a political... Ah, no, you moved to the left. That's good. Yes.
No, sorry,
I was afraid that you were a centrist.
Yeah, behind it in the red shirt. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Professor Zizek, I'm another fan of yours. I'm here.
Yeah, I see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
My Nazi instinct, are you Spanish?
No, I'm Indian. I'm from India.
I'm so sorry, I'm not. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm myopic, you know, it's not racism, yeah, please.
Yeah. So I'm studying here a course on environmental change and management. And we get to hear this one word like Anthropocene every now and then. Oh, species are going extinct.
Yeah.
Polar caps are melting, you know,
Yeah.
tropical forest deforestation.
Yeah, yeah.
And we club this one thing, Anthropocene, always and always.
Yeah.
It's like a plus. What do you think about this word? I find it very uncomfortable at times. I find it funny. I find it very serious. What is this word?
The word Anthropocene.
Yeah. What is your take on this? To club everything on this
Yeah.
one word. Yeah.
Well, I'm not qualified enough to judge it scientifically, But I like the paradoxes that this work implied. Namely, there is one insight in it which is correct, that all this modern progressism, humanity should develop further and further, that unfortunately you find it as an unquestionable base even in Marx, presupposes that we can count on nature as that vast background which, as they say, however we will screw it up, destroy ourselves and so on, the sun will rise, there will be another season and so on, that nature is this inexhaustible background. I think that what we are gradually discovering, and that's for me the first step of correct ecology, it's not that we should go a step further and not only admit our responsibility, we humans screwed it up. It is nice irony that precisely when we become incredibly powerful, we are confronted by our limit. We may destroy the very material conditions of our life. But what I like is this: what if we change perspective and ask ourselves if this entire perspective of human hubris, you know, nature is some kind of a balanced circle, but we men were too aggressive, exploitative, and then you have the idea is let's return to our proper place, and so on and so on. I think that the true horror and danger is that, if I may put it in these terms, we cannot rely on Mother Nature as this good caring entity, and we shouldn't provoke her too much by making violent intervention. What if nature is in itself a pretty cruel bitch, not a good mother? And I always evoke this simple example. You know, whenever we talk about human catastrophes and so on, caused by humanity, don't forget that, for example, our own sources of energy, oil, coal, can we even imagine what kind of mega catastrophes must have happened in prehistory of the earth, prehistory with regard to human history, that we have all these reserves? So my position is here even more tragic. I'm all for ecology, but without illusions. I think that there is no natural balance to which we can simply return. It's open, it's full of risks, and so on and so on. The situation is much more open. On the second hand, what interests me is this thing. We talk about Anthropocene, danger, humanity, blah, blah, blah. And here psychoanalysis maybe enters. Why don't we do more something? I think that the best term, some of my friends even now published a book where they developed this notion, that it's what psychoanalysts call the mechanism of disavowal. It's not simply negation. You admit it, but in an isolated forum. You reject to draw the consequences of it. Like the French term for this disavowal, Verleugnung, is the German term, is je sais bien mais quand même. I know very well that it's like this, but nonetheless, I don't really believe in it, so I ignore it. So I think there is something of this mechanism at work. Like, we all know, yes, global warming, this, there, but then, you know, you go out, okay, now not in Oxford, but in general, sun is shining and so on, and you simply cannot accept it. Will all this really be threatened? Now, the problem is then how to awaken us, truly. I want to avoid the conclusion that many of my leftist friends are attracted to, that we need one big mega catastrophe, that only this will awaken humanity. You know why I am afraid of this? Because, again, it's this typical traditional Marxist mistake. How do they know that the result of this catastrophe will be some society of solidarity, socialism? What if it will be a much more authoritarian society and so on? But my point, where maybe if I got the thrust of your question correctly, Where I share your interest is that although ecology is the topic today, we should all the more carefully analyze all the ideological traps that are there. And in this way, I will now, very briefly, return to your question. I forgot, what can philosophers do? I don't believe philosophers can answer. They can raise the right question. This is philosophy at its best. When? With ecology, with racism, and so on. It shows how the very way we formulate a problem is part of the problem, reproduces the problem, and so on and so on. My classical example is here harassment. Harassment, okay, real harassment, sexual harassment, nothing against. But the term harassment, even tolerance, are of limited use, even in fighting racism. Because I always make this experiment, which I tried. Go to the web and download Martin Luther King's speeches and look for tolerance in them. Practically non-existing term. When you confront racism as a problem of tolerance, it's already a certain reduction to cultural tolerance, to tolerate each other and so on. With harassment, it's the same. Harassment has always this, as it were, narcissistic undertone in the sense of, keep at a distance. Don't come too close to me. I think that harassment, the fear of harassment is not simply
705,000.
it is always also the fear of simply the over proximity of the real, actual other.
Vandelelelele. No.
And you find this again, even with leftist polite immigrants. But then if you look closely at their image of immigrants, you see that that's my dirty word. It's like, in today's society, I always use this example. We like to get a product, but in its cleansed form, like beer, yes, but without alcohol. Chocolate, yes, but without fat. Coffee, yes, but without coffee. And I claim that what we call sex is precisely sex without sex. And what we claim as standard bourgeois multiculturalism is precisely culturalism without the real other, There is nothing more racist for me than this, for example, American liberal image of so-called Native Americans. Oh, they're holistic, they don't just exploit nature, they are in a dialogue with nature, and so on and so on. I cannot imagine more implicitly racist things than this false respect of the other. I know, again, I didn't answer your question, but fuck it, that's life. Thank you very much. One more.
We take just one more final question. Let's go.
I hope this one can be a woman. My God, I feel.
Yeah, are there any women who want to ask a question? Yes, there's a woman at the back. I think. I can't see anything.
This is very patronizing, but
Yeah.
I want to save my, or as I like to say, ironically, precisely because privately I'm not a good feminist, I have to cover it up by. Please.
Okay, so in your talk, you define populism not as an act of perhaps cult of personality surrounding a leader, or even a leader being promoted through things like memes and internet culture,
Yeah.
but as an act of enemy creation. Would you say that even, for example, the British left at the moment, because you said this was a problem both on the left and the right, that specifically in Britain that perhaps like Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party at the moment have created an enemy, and if so, what would you say it is?
No, I'm greatly sympathetic to Corbyn, although I'm not an economist and I don't know what would have happened, but it's not that they are economically stupid. You know, our economic reality is not an objective fact. The way markets react is full of prejudices, fears, and so on, and what I fear, as all my friends, is that, let's say, Corbyn's Labour Party comes to power, and then there is some kind of a panicky market reaction and so on, and you can say irrational, but the effects can be very real. But another point, I wonder if you would agree. I follow a little bit the debates, and
Get back.
precisely what I, maybe I'm wrong, relatively like about Corbyn is that whatever he is, people usually even reproach him for that. But I like that.
Get back.
He's not a demagogic, charismatic
Get
woman.
back.
There is almost a blank person. No, it's him. And so I think he cannot compare with real European populism. Although they are not all bad, but look at Podemos is for me what I had in mind. As long as they played this game of, and when I said in my introductory 5 minutes when I said that how we cannot count on this in advance harmony, this is why the populist formula at least of Iglesias in Spain was forget even this burger words, all the screw, fuck, ideology, socialism, communism, turn to ordinary people, listen to their actual demands, troubles, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, I don't believe in this. Of course, up to a point we should do it, but look where it brought Podemos. They got there 15% or whatever, and you know, I'm always fascinated by, it's easy to be a protest party. You register protest of the people and so on. But then look at their electoral program in the last election. It wasn't even a very radical social democracy. And people were disappointed because all the big rhetoric, listening to real people and so on, ended up in very, very modest proposals, raise the taxes a little bit here and so on, up and down. You see, that's another problem that I have with the very notion of populism, is that it is, for me, this will be a general reflection, too much, it relies too much to an idea of emergency state. Populist moment is, it's not normal, it's antagonism, tension, and so on. But I think, I'm here a radical leftist, but very careful one. I think that the really crucial moment of every revolution is when things, sooner or later, stabilize, when life returns to normal. How do ordinary people feel the difference at that point? I hate this big thing, 1 million people on the square there, yeah, what happens there? Like, in Arab Spring. You have 1 million people on Tahrir Square, and then you get Muslim Brotherhood, and now you get military regime, and so on and so on. In Greece, it was a tragedy. I blame them. But you got the biggest popular mobilization, Syriza, at the end. Are we aware what totally crazy thing happened there? Syriza, which built its reputation on rejecting austerity, became the most faithful executor of austerity. So you see, that's my skepticism of populism. I don't think it addresses or answers the true question. I'm very naive, old-fashioned, although I don't believe in traditional Marxist answers. Marxist here. The big problem is, and all other things are bullshit. Do we have a serious, feasible alternative to global capitalism, or are we all enlightened leftist Fukuyamites? Which means Fukuyama was basically right, democracy, capitalism, we just, let's move it a little bit towards the left, and so on and so on. And I don't see any communist party or whatever saving us. I'm a pessimistic communist in the sense that I think that with regard to problems that we are facing today, ecology, immigrants, or this, not just immigrants, this global world disorder, mega topic, biogenetics, all the experiments today, prospects of directly wiring our brain, linking them. Who will control this? What will be the result of all this? I don't think that the way our societies are structured now, economically and politically, is appropriate to even properly confront these questions. And I fear a great pessimist because I'm the first to admit that what we knew till now as communism was, if anything, even worse.
Oh no, oh no, oh no.
I'm again a communist out of despair. I see the need for a radical change, but there is no predetermination. Maybe
2
it will
graviton
not
names.
happen. Maybe Hollywood is right.
Sucks.
By Hollywood is right, I mean it's incredible how even Hollywood sees this dark prospect in all these post-catastrophic movies, Hunger Games, and so on and so on. In some sense, they are right. We are approaching a new divided society. I mean, are we aware what Trump means? Every functioning democracy has to rely on a set of presuppositions. You can have all the polemics and so on, but against the background on not just procedural, but even more substantial presuppositions about the basis of economic order, about the basis of democratic decision, and so on and so on. And that's what is happening now in the United States. It's literally already an ideological civil war. This shared ground, which was till now very operative between Republicans and Democrats, is disintegrating. And my belief is that what Trump did, I will not say his great result, but he did something. He ruined this liberal democratic consensus shared by all. And maybe we should be courageous enough to admit that the solution is not simply to re-establish that consensus, but that we should propose another consensus, a little bit more to the left, what Sloterdijk called objective social democracy. Because I think, again, that it's a tremendous thing that today, it's not only Trump. Trump is part of the global movement, what happens in China and so on, where a new authoritarian capitalism is emerging. And again, it's a very dangerous situation. That's why, to conclude, I don't agree with those who cry fascism, fascism. This is the worst manner of old left. They are too lazy to think, which is when something emerges which nobody likes, instead of thinking it seriously, they just reduce it to some old things which already happened and we don't like. Trump, fascism. No, sorry, Trump is not simply a fascist, my God. Even this alt-right populism now is not simply fascist. I think we really live in a dangerous situation. But again, my hope is, although I'm well aware of the horror of Maoism, great leap forward, up to 50 million dead and so on. But I still admire the saying by Mao, there is disorder under the heaven, so the situation is excellent. We shouldn't be afraid to act in this situation. I stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary.
I'm really scared. I don't want to start showing ads.
Hello, dear guests. Dear guests, friends, welcome to Ljubljana in Zagreb to the final evening. Tonight we have a pleasure to invite two important
Good job.
Yanis Varoufakis, economist and professor from individual. What is political moment in Europe stage? What are the paths and problems of nowadays movement? How is the conversation will last approximately 1 hour and a half and will be in English language. After the conversation, Witzlauer will have your
Die.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with my good friend Yanis, and those who know me know very well what do I mean by good friend. He voluntarily accepts all my dirty jokes. Now,
even enjoy them.
I thought always that masochism is a feminine category. Okay, now more seriously. The reason I accepted this talk is that what we need in these days, I think, more than ever is what the great philosopher of enlightenment, Immanuel Kant, called public use of reason. He opposes, as some of you maybe know, public use of reason to private use of reason. But in what way? For Kant, state administration, theological faculty, faculty of law, this is private use of reason because it serves a preordained order, state interests, and so on. While if we meet just to debate something, thinking, really it is public use of reason. And public use of reason is what is under threat, what is disappearing today. Public use of reason means not just to think, but to reflect on thinking itself. Don't be afraid, I will give you a simple example. Here in Slovenia, a couple of days ago, I saw on TV a report on those anti-COVID measures, where a lady was saying, I'm here not for politics, I don't care about politics. It's only for my freedom and human rights that I am here. Now, our first act here should be to analyze this term. But what do we mean by freedom? In what conditions it's possible to be free? What do we mean by politics? Following my good friend Alenka Zupancic, I would like to paraphrase her what she said in a recent interview, that we all talk about politics of emancipation. But what we need today is also emancipation of politics. In the sense that we don't need less politics. We need more engaged politics. Because are you aware that when you have this cynical attitude, politics is a whore, who cares about it, just mind your own business, this is, I think, the stance which fits perfectly those in power. So that's why we are here, and I would just like to begin to approaching Greece with a difference, which, and then immediately I give you the word, which shows nicely the superiority of Greek civilization over our Greece. Recently I read that we discovered some doctors who you pay 300-400 euros, you get a fake vaccine. We have it. Yeah, but as I am informed, is it true or not? With a difference. Your doctors did something wonderful, and that's where I support them. You know what they did? Okay, you are opposed to vaccination, you pay 400 and they give you something, they tell you, oh, it's just water, just go to that. They discovered that these doctors were giving you real vaccination. And I think this is how when we criticize, and again, we Soviets are so primitive. When I hear anecdotes like that, I understand why Greeks are the origin of Western civilization. But more serious, now, sorry, I finish.
We are the inventors of mythology.
Sorry?
We are the inventors of mythology. This is a great myth, a very instructive myth, but I feel it.
No, but what I really want to say that the reason I like this story is that it has a very strong lesson for our, now I'm getting serious, for our situation today. That the way the power mechanism plays you is not counting on your naivety, but counting precisely on your distrust. That's how conspiracy theories work. Don't trust those in power. For example, with pandemic, the motto of skeptics is do your own research. What does this mean? That you go to Google and put it on search, and of course that is many conspiracy theories that you want. So what I'm saying is that I think I even read somewhere this, the British whatever, have this wonderful expression, lamp to slaughter. You don't have to catch the lamp, it's voluntarily waiting in life. That's how ideology works today. It takes into account our skeptical distance and so on and so on. Short introduction, finished. Now I ask the question. If you want, it's more like what they call in detective movies a third degree. You can get stronger. Because light if you want.
The Gestapo light.
Gestapo, yeah. Because questions will be serious. The first one, Syriza. We know you were almost in the end finance minister and so on. We know what it happened. Just to remind. On the one hand, it was the demand of the European Union, acceptance and so on. On the other hand, the Brexit guys. Let's do the revolution, let's step up and so on. And you now we by I mean like public all around Europe, we were on your side. We were all the time maybe naive, believing that you, now not you personally, but the whole gang of Syriza, that you had a big plan. Something secretly to, sorry for the vulgarity, this is the testimony of European Union. Now, we learned lately that after they fired you, that Tsipras and his guys, they didn't have a B plan. Like, they just capitulated. But you acted at that point as if you had some plan. You even publicly, now comes the friendly aggressive part, acted as if, I remember a couple of interviews, as if in a couple of days you will see, I will make a deal and so on and so on. So what is your vision? Did you really had in your mind what, but not in Tony Blair sense, a third way? You know, like, was there possible to break out of this vicious cycle, either compromise with European Union or Grexit, simple, brutal Grexit, which you convinced me. Once we talked when you were finance minister and you told me that some financial specialists told you that if you do brutally Grexit, the standard of living would have fallen for a further 30%, that it would have been a catastrophe. What was your third way, if there was any? I mean it seriously, because many people think that you didn't have a third way, that you were also bluffing.
There was a plan. I still believe that it was eminently workable. And
You still believe
I
it?
still believe it. I know it. And you know why? Because I was told so by my enemies. I only believe my enemies. I never believe my friends. Not because they're not trustworthy people, but usually they don't know. They know as much as I know, which is not that much.
Who are the end?
But
Name them. Who are the end?
Mario Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank. What was the plan? The plan had... I'm not going to speak too long about this because I've written a whole book about it.
Because you don't really have a plan, no?
No, I did have a plan. It's just I've spoken about it far too often.
Okay.
And there is a 600-page book on it. But, okay, what was the plan? The plan, by the way, Samuel, was the reason why I was finance minister. I was not a member of the Syriza party. I never wanted to be a minister. I didn't want to be a parliamentarian or a politician for that matter. It's just because when Tsipras was about to become prime minister, I said to him, so what are you going to do when they squeeze you? And he said, I have no idea. We have an idea. So I had an idea and I proposed it, the plan. And he said, this is great, but I don't have anybody to implement it. So you're going to finance it. And I thought, well, you know, that should have kept my mouth shut. But then, of course, moral duty, all those bourgeois concepts, right, pushed me to saying yes. But what was the plan? The plan was this. This is the beginning of 2015. Draghi, who was in the central bank since the end of 2011, spent all the time between 2011 and the beginning of 2015 struggling to create the circumstances for him to buy Italian debt, because Italy was on the way out, 3 trillion euros worth of debt. If that debt had blown up, the Eurozone would have blown up. You wouldn't have euros in your pockets now. Germany would have recreated the Deutsche Mark. It's very simple. Okay? So the only thing that saved the euro was that he was going to save the Italians. But he had to go against the German central bank. So there was a big clash between Mario Draghi, the central bank, and the head of the Bundesbank, the German central bank. They even ended up in court. The German central bank chief tabled 120 pages of an affidavit against Mario Draghi in the European courts. It's a huge clash. Okay, so Merkel and Draghi were working against the chief of the Bundesbank. We're talking about serious clashes. Okay, these are the contradictions of the system. That if you're a tiny little pipsqueak finance minister of a tiny pipsqueak country, you have to exploit. And I thought I had found the weak point of the empire, of the Star Wars spaceship, right? And it was this. The only way Draghi managed to convince the European courts to allow him to buy Italian debt was if he pledged that he wouldn't allow €1 of the debt that he purchased to be written down. And when I realized...
Sorry, so that people understand, even what do you mean by written down?
Written off. Wiped out.
Okay.
You know? Expunged. Haircut. The Greek state owed 29 billion to the central bank. These were bonds that the central bank had. And they were in Greek law, which meant the finance minister of Greece could simply do whatever he wanted with them. Say that he will not be paid for another 100 years. This is effectively writing it down. So, a week before the election, I knew from the polls. In an interview with the BBC, I was just a candidate for a member of parliament, formally, right? But I knew I was going to be finance minister if he won. In an interview with the BBC, I was asked some irrelevant question, and on purpose I said, I gave an irrelevant answer as a signal to Mario Draghi. And it was this. If Syriza wins and we're in government, immediately we're going to get a phone call from Frankfurt, from the European Central Bank, threatening us with bank closures and squeezing. The answer should be, we're going to write down those 29 billion of debt. Because this is what you do. When your central bank squeezes you, you squeeze them back. And that would impede the purchase of Italian debt. Cut. 2 weeks later, I'm finance minister, and I'm in Frankfurt, and I have my first meeting with Mario Draghi. First thing he says to me, after 2 hours of boring meetings, when we were on one-on-one, is, please, Jens, don't mention me. And of course, we had a dialectic of recognition, right? And I said, I will never not do that if you don't shut down my banks. Okay? 2 months later, I learned from within the European Central Bank, from a very high-ranking whistleblower, not Mario Draghi himself, but somebody very close, that the Greek Prime Minister, Mike Conrad, had authorized a message to go through the Deputy Prime Minister, to Draghi, don't listen to Varoufakis, we're not going to let him do it. So there was a plan, it would have worked, there would have been some compromise. Of course there would have been a compromise. We would have to give stuff, but we would get effectively the only thing that I cared for. The only reason why I became part of this struggle was to get Greeks out of debtor's prison. That we would have achieved. And in the final analysis, so that was plan B, and there was a plan X. Plan X was a drama. Because yes, it is true that we would have lost not 30, 20% GDP again, but we would recover relatively quickly, within 18 to 20 months. Because in the end, at the moment, after all those years, our income now in Greece is lower than it was in 2013, and our debt is much, much higher, and we are a debt colony. We would have stopped being a debt colony. So, no regrets for anything, except that I was a bit too lenient with the Troika.
Okay, just two, and then we went to other topics. Two, or maybe even just one, how do you call it, sub-question.
Okay.
The obvious Stalinist one, which is conspiracy, that's me. Why did Tsipras do it? What you said.
Look, I have an ideological objection to giving a shit. This is between him and his maker, as the Christians would say. Why should I care about what he did? Why he did it? He did it. That's the only thing that matters. Why
Hey, Elizabeth, are you still there? You want to add me on Macarena?
You did.
What is your Macarena name?
No, what I
Elizabeth?
meant is, was there pressure from some Greek banking circles?
Of course there was pressure. I had pressure. Can you imagine the pressure? The pressure was unbelievable. Threats to our family. Pressure galore. But why were we elected? We were elected knowing that that pressure would be there. It's like saying, you know, you go to war and suddenly you're scared. Of course you're scared, it's war. If you're not scared,
I'm waiting for
if you don't want to be scared,
Yes
then go
Daddy to
war.
come back.
You get elected to be prime minister on the basis that you're proposing the escape, the mass escape from the debtor's prison. Deal with your fear. Don't succumb to it and do not surrender.
Just another sub question concerning all this debt stuff and so on, or maybe we should, I'm not sure how far we should go here. Okay.
I'm going for this.
Okay, let's stop with this line and go to the next point. Big question, which is, because I don't want to get lost in this. It is all these affairs of Greece and so on. What I attracted me to you, what I liked, I remember meeting you in those years, was that, okay, first nonetheless the sub-question. But didn't you write in your book that with that half-pornographic title, only for the adults or whatever, didn't you write in that book that when you threatened Schäuble, I think, we will do Grexit, that he basically told you, okay, do it, we give you 30 billion.
No, that's Tsipras said that. I never said that.
Ah, sorry, I thought it's you,
No,
my
that's
mistake.
Tsipras. That's Tsipras' excuse. That when we threatened him with Grexit, it was his wish. That's, that's just a big, huge, fat lie. We never threatened with Grexit. I knew that Schäuble wanted Grexit. Remember, my strategy was always to exploit the ruptures and the contradictions within the system. Okay. So one was the clash between the European Central Bank and the Bundesbank. The other one, major one, was the clash between the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, and the Finance Minister, Wolfgang Schäuble.
But they were not on the same.
It was the mightiest of clashes. Worse than the clash between Greece and
Privately to you, yes.
I'm not going to put that into it. But it was a clear difference of opinion. Merkel and Draghi wanted to keep Greece in a debtor's prison. Schäuble wanted to keep Greece out in order to send a signal to Paris. This is what you get if you want to use the Deutschmark, the euro, same thing, and then you don't do as you're told. It's really a very clear difference of opinion. Schäuble was the one who proposed to make Grexit. I never said it. All I said was, I'm not taking another credit card. Because we were bankrupt since 2010, and the crime against logic that was being imposed upon Greece by the Troika was they forced us to pretend we're not bankrupt, and the only way you can force somebody to pretend they're not bankrupt is by forcing them to borrow more money. And under conditions of austerity that shrinks your income, which was not enough to pay the previous debts, let alone the new debts. Okay, so I was saying to him, I'm not signing. Imagine you owe money to the bank. That's it. The bank say, let's restructure my debt, reduce the amount of debt so I can pay it. Because if you ask to pay it, I'll go back and get nothing. This is what bankers do every day. Imagine if the bank were to say, I'm going to give you a credit card from which you're going to draw money with interest, hefty interest, to repay the previous credit cards. But the condition for giving you that new credit card is that you will shrink your income. You would look at the bank and say, yeah, I'm going to shrink. That's as if I'm going to say that. As if I'm going to say yes to that. So my line to Schäuble was, I'm not taking another credit card, pretending that I'm going to pay you back on condition of destroying what is left. And his argument was, okay, you're right. This doesn't confess that what he was proposing to us, what the Troika was pushing down our throat, never work. Lagarde confessed it to me too. Her argument was, yes, but you're right, you have to do what you're told, because otherwise your credibility as a politician is going to suffer. What my credibility as a politician suffers or doesn't suffer. one Schäuble said to me, get out. And that, at that point, the moment he said to me, get out of the Euro, I said, Wolfgang, you're great to deliver in democratic institutions. Mandate from said no. I take my phone. Wolfgang said to me that he proposed to get out of the Euro and that a large part of the debt is written off. You pay in souvlaki, right? You know, or pistachios or something. I've got a question for you, Alexei. Do you authorize me to have this discussion with him? And he said, yeah, okay. But not that we are accepting it, just authorize to find out what he's offering. In front of us. Put the phone down. Your turn. He said, oh, I'm not going to speak to her now, I'm going to speak to her tomorrow, I'll call you back. We talked again a couple of days later. So what happened? He said, look, I fear that if I tell her that she's not going to give the okay. So, you know, I was playing that game, and in the end he never got the okay to discuss this with me. Okay. But, you see, so Grexit was never their strategy. It was Schäuble's strategy, and Merkel always vetoed it. But in the end, to cut a long story short, I think that on the balance of probabilities, and this is a delicious paradox, one of those that we love, if we were prepared to get out of the euro, we wouldn't have to get out of the euro. If we were prepared to see it all the way to the end of the line, because the threat was we'll throw you out, we'll shut your banks, and then you will have to create your own currency. If we said yes, as I was ready to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to issue my own currency, whatever the cost. You know, freedom has no price. We will do it. If we were prepared to do it, they would come to us at the 11th hour, begging us not to do it, and we would have the debt haircut that we needed.
So that was the plan. That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah.
But at the same time, it was not bluffing, because people said, no, this is poker. No, it's not poker. Because to bluff in cards, it means to pretend that you have a power that you don't have. I was not pretending. I was going to take it all the way to the end with a drachma. So I had what in game theory we call a dominant strategy. A dominant strategy is one that you should follow, you should want to follow, independently of what the other side does. Right? Then that's not bluffing. It's the definition of not bluffing.
Okay. I would like to go on
Yeah, let's go
indefinitely
on.
here, but let's go
Because
to
there's no
just one Stalin-
public intellectual discussion so far.
Yeah, but for this, when people, that's to say, you take power, you get 2 years to start, but that's another story. So, seriously, so you think, if I may quote the immortal Comrade Stalin, that in the choice Merkel versus Schäuble, which was worse, they were both worse? Or is there...
I preferred Schäuble anytime.
Huh?
Yeah.
That's good to know. Yes, me
Yeah,
also.
because you see, if he was chancellor, he and I would have an agreement. We would get out of the euro. We would not end up in that prisoners, in that debt prison forever. Or we wouldn't get out. The one thing we agreed on, because it was a really dramatic moment. It's captured in the movie by Costa Gavras. I tried to capture it. A great guy. Because Costa Gavras, it was going to be Ray Fiennes.
Sorry?
It was going to be Ray Fiennes, because Costa Gavras decided that he wants realism, which is a very bad idea now.
Very bad idea. Yeah.
Very bad idea. And he wants realism meant that when my characters spoke with Cyprus characters, when I would speak to them, that would be in English, so no Greek actor. So, but you know, there was this moment there in the finance ministry. By the way, you know what it is. You know what it is. You don't know. It's Goering's headquarters.
That's what I know, but I don't know where it is. But this I knew, yeah.
It's the same building. It's mind-numbing. You can feel the aura. And it's ugly. A sin.
Good.
Anyway.
It's seen ugly.
Well, this is my Anglo-Saxon upbringing, right? I didn't mean it sin. Okay, so he was pushing me to sign, and I kept saying no. And at some point I said, he was becoming very assertive. And I said, look, Wolfgang, I'm not going to sign. But I would like to ask you for a favor. You've been in this business for 40 years, politics. I've been in this business for 4 months. Can we pretend for 10 minutes that we're not ministers? So that you will give me your advice, not to order me one. I said, we're not ministers now. Tell me, if you were me, would you sign? And my astonishment, he looked outside the window. For a while, and then nerve-wracking. And then he looked at me. But I would actually like to.
Ouch.
He said, as a patriot, no. And then I said, so why are you forcing me to? Don't you understand? What am I going to do with Paris? They want to have the Deutschmark and they want to run their own national budget. You can't have both. So every time you use the euro, remember it's the Deutschmark. Don't mistake it.
Okay. I'm so sorry, we could go endlessly this way, but let's go to the next bit. Just one remark which you will like. I remember that when we first met around that time, I was immediately attracted by why you told me that it now, but so brutally, and I will say now that your message to Schäuble and so on was, what I'm bringing you is the most rational way to get some of your money back. You are not playing this sentimental violin, you are seeing people. No, you
never.
wanted them to get some money back. You were honest.
You know, you've heard of Amartya Sen, the
Yeah.
Indian economist. Nice guy.
Really?
Very clever.
I have problems with
Yeah,
Indians,
because
but that's minor racism.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He's a smart man. I met him in London after the end of this period when I had resigned, and he said, "You know, Yanis, what your problem was? He had gotten it. You were negotiating with creditors who did not want their money back.
Yeah.
They didn't want their money back. They wanted to crash us. In which case, we should simply have agreed to get out of the euro. But you know, at the same time, Merkel was above that. She had a good concept of what was at stake, because she had German manufacturers, Volkswagen, Siemens, and so on, holding her to not letting the euro crash, because the last thing that they wanted was the recreation of the Italian national currency, the lira, because they hated the lira before 2000. Why? Because every time Volkswagen became slightly more competitive than the equivalent Fiat, the Italian central bank would devalue the lira and make it cheaper. And German industrialists hated that. So, you know, Merkel had them in mind, whereas Schäuble had a more hegemonic power game in his mind.
Okay, now you already approached the second question, where I'm even more, if this is possible, on your side, as it's already clear with this wonderful paradoxical formula that you propose, that you have a creditor who does not want you to repay the debt. Isn't it, we talked about this often, one of the features of, I don't know how to call it, new phase in the world order, where, as you told me, We no longer live in this traditional neoliberal market order and so on and so on. I remember we were talking even on phone. You remember that moment? I think it was in the spring or summer of 2020, when on the almost the same day that the numbers came out from United Kingdom and United States of how the production fell down, stock market went up. And then you say there is something tremendous happening now in capitalism. It's no longer the old market, profit, productivity, and so on.
It's no longer capitalism.
Can you develop this?
Gee, Daddy.
I'll
Where's
go back to
yesterday?
that date. Thank you for reminding me. It was the
There he
12th of August, 2020, not the last August, the previous one. 9 o'clock in the morning in London, the news came out that the national income of Britain had fallen by more than 20%. That had never happened before in the history of capitalism. British GDP falling in 1 year. Never. It was not anticipated. The markets were expecting all 8, 9, 10%, 20% more. 15 or 16 minutes later, the stock exchange, the London Stock Exchange, was up again.
Stop.
There can be no explanation along the lines of capitalism. One explanation would have been if the markets were already factoring in, expecting a 10% decline, and it was 8%. Things were better than expected, so the stock exchange might have gone up. But to expect 10%, 20%, and the stock exchange to go up, something else will happen. I know what it is. Since 2008, the great financial crash, capitalism is being kept alive by constant injections of money from central banks. That has never happened before.
No. Good job. 19 to 4. Ah.
So the banking system
It's
and
on
the stock
par.
had 12 years of getting used to becoming addicted to central bank money being pumped their way during difficult moments. So, imagine the stock market. You hear the news at 9 o'clock in the morning. Minus 20%. Oh my God! Guys and girls in the Bank of England, central bank of England, are panicking. So they're going to do is they're going to print even more bills. So the point I've been developing in my head, we had a little discussion about this earlier because I was telling you stuff.
Good
My
job.
crazy theory.
No.
Capitalism is already evolved out and the reason why I say that is because for me capitalism requires two things. Firstly, profit to drive it. It's like, a petrol engine that needs petrol. Capitalism needs profit, private profit to drive it. Capitalism is engine. And the other thing is that exploitation takes place in markets. Feudalism, there was no market exploitation. You had peasants. The sheriff, on behalf of the Lord, would come and take them. There was no market. It is with the fictional presence that become suppliers of labor at any price that you have the creation of the working class and the labor market. There was no labor market before. So exploitation takes place in markets. Money markets, land markets, house markets, labor markets. But now, after 12 years of the 2008 crisis and beyond, we have the replacement of profit by central bank money. That is the new fuel of the system, of this exploited system. And the steady encroachment into the space of markets of platforms. Amazon. The moment you go into Amazon or Facebook, the moment you enter Facebook, you're outside of capitalism. You're not in capitalism anymore. You enter.
Because, explain.
Yeah, you go into Facebook, right? Let's say you want to sell your stuff, to advertise your business in Facebook. You go in, you pay, you use your credit card, you pay money to Zuckerberg, and some more people see your advertisements, right? You go in there to meet your friends. You want to advertise this evening. You go and pay money. So one person owns the whole digital space. It is the equivalent of stepping outside in Ljubljana. Imagine, just science fiction for a moment. Imagine you step out in Ljubljana, in the streets of Ljubljana today, and you look around and you think, oh my God, all these buildings belong to one person. Everything that is traded in the shops that you see is controlled by one person who decides what prices are charged, what prices are not charged, who can trade, who can't trade, who can buy, who can't buy. And moreover, imagine that Ljubljana operated like Facebook does, or Amazon does, whereby what your eyes see is determined by one person, by the algorithm of one person. If he wants you not to see something, you will never see it in that digital space. This is not a market. This is a feed. Digital feed. Those platforms. The rest of it. Look at companies like Uber, for instance. They've never made a profit, ever. You have private equity. Have you heard of private equity? Do you know what private equity does? They go and they buy a company. Let's say a company that provides health services. Doctors, nurses, and stuff. Private. So they buy the hospital, they buy the company. And then they create two companies. One that owns the buildings and all the fixed assets. And the other that provides the services. And the second company sells the services to the first company. The first company has assets, buildings. So they go to the bank and they get a huge loan, using as collateral the buildings of the first company. They take this money and they give it to themselves. They pay themselves. Pocket. Now, this whole company will never have a profit. Because the second company will owe a huge quantity of money to the first company. Therefore, they will never pay any tax. Because if you have no profit, there is no tax. But the whole point about profitability, very soon after that, this shells will go bankrupt, will die. So platforms are expanding, even in health. Facebook is now privatizing the National Health Service in Britain without anybody knowing. Google is doing the same thing, behind the scenes. By the way, the surreptitious privatization, close brackets. So you see, platforms are expanding, they are not markets, and markets are shrinking, and central bank money, sovereign money, the defense money, because they are the governments, they have no power, but their printing presses are keeping the system alive. I call this techno-fidelity. And it's not just a question of curiosity about how the system works. It's also a question of what does this mean for daily lives? What does it mean for all of us? What does it mean about for governments? Everybody means it's economy. It means that none of the fiscal and monetary policies that used to everything depends on something. If I make you the head of the European Central Bank tomorrow, you are the most slavish follower of the rules. You have no independence, you have no authority. Even if you want to reduce the amount of money, euros, that the ECB prints, you can't do it. The moment you do it, the whole thing will collapse. It's not central bank independence. It means that our governments are completely in the clasps of the interests of the individuals. And they have tiny degrees regarding fiscal policy, regarding the distribution of wealth, when all the wealth is encased and enclosed in the new fiefdoms. But also, and something that nice to talk a little bit more about. Look, understanding capitalism in the working class, which is exploited during the working class. And then they go home, and that's time. Today you have that proletariat that's shrinking. And increasingly, everybody is producing capital directly for these fiefdoms. Every time you have your phone and you walk around, Google knows where you are, and that enriches the software of Google Maps. It adds your movements, add capital to Google. You're not a shareholder. You don't get shares for that capital. They get it, right? With the pandemic, we've seen how work and leisure have been completely decoupled, and how with these digital fiefdoms technologies, it is impossible to even escape for a moment the vestiges of work. It follows you. Your boss expects you to be checking your app at midnight. You yourself check your app, even if your boss doesn't want you to check your app. You become self-enslaved. And the most important value of liberalism, which is personal sovereignty, goes. Think of the youngsters. You know, I used to be a professor up until a few years ago. I still am in name. But I look at today's youth, and what I find is
control point.
Young people lacking the sovereignty that the liberal democratic system has promised them. I see them, for instance, take on courses that they know just to add to the scene. I see them constantly trying to improve their social ratings in Instagram, because they're selling themselves constantly. They're creating a profile that makes them, because they know that the moment they go in for an interview, that the interviewing panel is going to check their social media profile. So it's a constant struggle to build up a profile along the lines of the expectations of some fictitious future employer. That is slavery. The complete collapse of the private space that liberals value so much. These are the reasons why, to me, techno-feudalism, is such a menace. The worst part about it, when I speak of this, do you know who really loathes my thesis more than anybody else? The left. Because we leftists grew up with this ambition that we would bring capitalism.
Dang you!
And here I am telling them that, you know what? We're out of time. Capitalism has brought itself down and it's been replaced by something far worse, called by socialism. The left does not want to listen to that. They really loathe that message.
Perfect. Now we are going in the right direction. A sub-question. A sub-question. I know there are many answers to this, but you are, for me, for the time being still, some kind of subject supposed to know. So one of the enigmas, from a very superficial standpoint, I know there are many explanations, I want to hear yours, is with all this money thrown into, why is there no inflation? Now there are only lately some fears of inflation. What's your answer to the inflation problem?
Okay. Between 2008 and the pandemic, we had a constant manufacture of mountain range of money that was thrown into the economy. Traditional monetary dragging economy is no, zero inflation. Some countries struggling to create inflation, they couldn't. They were pumping money into the economy, holding prices from prices stagnant or falling. Why was that the case?
Yeah.
Well, while wealth was going on, wealth was very, very few. Because think about it. 2008 was our 1929, complete collapse of the financial sector, immediately a recession, very low investment, very low demand, low quality jobs, as David Graeber called them bullshit jobs. Okay. So that was the scene since 2009. The central bank prints money. What is the theory of quantitative easing, as it's called, money printing? Up until 2008, the idea was that if you want to stimulate the economy through the central bank, you reduce interest rates. Well, you can't reduce them when they are zero. You can take them to zero, minus 0.5. But if you take them to minus 3%, would you keep money in the bank if you lost 3% every month? So the banking system will be destroyed. So they reached the lower zero bound, and then they had to do something to stimulate further. So they started printing money. But the thing is, in capitalism, as we had it in the last 100 years, since the creation of the Fed, the Central Bank of the United States and so on, the legal structure is this. You have a central bank. The central bank is not like other banks. You and I cannot have accounts with the central bank, but the banks have an account with the central bank. So all the commercial banks have an account with the central bank. The central bank, if it wants to create money, it effectively gives an overdraft facility. It types numbers, a few billion, into the accounts of the commercial banks, hoping that the commercial banks will get that money, it's free money, to lend it to businesses who are then going to take it and invest it. Hire people, invest in machinery, education, training, and so on. Right? That's the theory. What's the reality? The reality, and I have witnessed that, I have to tell you. The reality is this. Take the European Central Bank. I could take the Fed or any other, but we are in the Eurozone, so I'll take the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank, somebody from the office, the staff, calls up Deutsche Bank. Says, I've got a couple of trillion euros. I will give it to you at minus 0.5 interest rate. You know what that means. I will pay you to take it. I will pay you 0.5% to take it. I mean, who in their right mind says no? Imagine if I were to say that I'm going to pay you to take money off my hands. So Deutsche Bank says give it. Now Deutsche Bank looks at all the people out there who suffer austerity, who have bullshit jobs, and says, yes, I'll lend it to them. I will never get it back. So you know what Deutsche Bank does? Picks up the phone and calls Volkswagen, Siemens, Alstom, Google, Apple, right? And say, would you like some free money? I've got a few billion here. I'll give it to you for free. Zero. Deutsche Bank is already made a profit. It's paid for by the central bank to take it and giving it away. It's a very easy life.
For those
people. Volkswagen already, by the way, Google. Apple has $210 billion of savings. Just stating that, there's something really wrong with capitalism, because companies should never save. You and I should save, and companies should borrow it from us to invest. When the companies have billions of savings, there's something wrong. Close that. But nevertheless, Volkswagen has billions in the bank, which is not investing. It's too fearful. Why is Volkswagen not investing? They could have created a Tesla, a competitor. But they look at you folks and say, yes, if they would be able to buy it. Useless, poor folks. They can't afford to pay 100,000 euros for a top-range Tesla competitor. So instead, they do something simpler. They take the money from Deutsche Bank and they go to the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And you know what they do? They buy Volkswagen shares. Volkswagen buys Volkswagen shares. Guess what happens to the share price? Their own salaries, Volkswagen directors, are linked to the share price. So they get money out of that. Personal money, not as a company. And they go to Berlin and buy a nice house prices. So if you have apartments in Berlin, you benefit. So there is a lot of asset price inflation. But the little people out there don't have money to buy anything, so there's no price inflation. So that was the situation up until now. Now things are getting slightly different. What happened was COVID-19. During this period of globalization, the neoliberal story, not the reality. Whereas once upon a time, you had cars making one piece making engines and another one making the chassis and then in the last 30 years, I was reading about that, a Nissan Qashqai made a new Qashqai more than she made 120 and the fender, protecting piece of plastic at the front, crisscrossed and the continent 35 times before it was completed. First it would go as metal, then they would do something, and they would go back, they would put some lights on, then they would go back. So this is what I mean by supply chains. Lots of transporting. And a supply network that was working like a Swiss watch, beautifully. Everything measured the last moment, just in moment, you know, no warehouses to save on money. So it would be a system that worked like clockwork. You know, you would need a shock absorber, and suddenly the shock absorber would arrive in a truck. You wouldn't have to store it anywhere. Okay. But the moment COVID-19 hit, and the government pressed the stop button, all those factories stopped working. Now, the ships that were, the container ships that were carrying stuff from China to Los Angeles, industrial goods, iPhones, whatever, they were in mid-journey. They were in the middle of the Pacific. They couldn't stop. So they went to Los Angeles. They all accumulated in Los Angeles. They got there, the ports were not working, nothing was working, they got stuck there. Okay? Similarly, the tankers carrying LNG, liquid gas, from Qatar to China, continued and ended up in China, unloaded the LNG, right? Stayed there. Then when they pressed the green button again for the whole system to work again, it couldn't work. Why? Because all the ships that should carry stuff that was being produced in China were all in Los Angeles. And all the ships that were carrying energy from Qatar to China were in China. Now you may say that, okay, well, how long does it take for those ships to go back? It takes a month. Yeah, it takes a month, but it doesn't solve the problem, because by the time they're back, the stockpiles are huge. Meanwhile, COVID-19 meant that consumer demand for goods went up, because we were all stuck inside the house and we were ordering stupid things to pass the time with, right? So demand went up, stockpiles went up, and the supply chains broke down. That pushed energy prices up, that pushed transport price. Now, there is another element here, which but that's why important that I should let you into the secret. Capitalism works on the basis of futures markets. The great money, great profits are not made so much in buying and selling stuff, but in buying and selling the right to buy and sell stuff, right? So people go to the Chicago exchange and they buy next year's oranges that doesn't exist, which will exist next year. They can do the same thing with transport. They can buy transport capacity now for the next 10 years. So speculators who predicted that the transport costs for a container would go up because of this, of what just described, they went in and bought the transport capacity of 80% of shipping all at once. And their game now is to starve the market of transport capacity in order to push the price up further. So these futures capitalist markets are turbocharging the problem that COVID-19 created with supply chains. And similarly with energy. With energy you have other aspects too. You have Vladimir Putin, who is playing games with the European Union in order to force the European force to convince the European Union to give the green light
in a democratic debate.
to give the green light to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that bypasses Ukraine and going through down the Baltic Strait to Germany. He's reducing the supply of energy At a time when, for some reason, wind, I've been told, has died down in the last 8 months compared to the average strength of the wind in the North Sea and across Europe, which meant that wind power generation went down at a time when the supply of gas, because of... So there are... Okay, these things should iron themselves out very quickly. But when you throw in the speculation, it's much easier to see how these problems are magnified and stretched into the future. Now, with working classes, the precariat, the weaker members of society, having suffered 12, 30 years of this deflation, while the rich are getting richer through the process of money printing by the central banks that I described, when these people are facing the deflation, they have incredibly bad jobs. They are now facing increases in their rents. They're facing increases in their electricity bill and so on. You realize that their circumstances are becoming increasingly unbearable, even though for the last 12 years they were almost used to unbearable circumstances. This is now getting deeper and worse. Add to this the terrible authoritarianism of states and governments that through COVID-19 discovered that they can do anything they want with this. Because think about it, I mean, I'm not against lockdowns if you have a pandemic, but the power to say...
I want to go watch this stuff.
It's an exorbitant power.
Alright, so yeah, I'm about to pass out, so I'm going to drop off, but good morning. Good morning. Y'all take care.
The 1% of the 1%.